Okay, so good afternoon and welcome to our webinar on the subject of mitigating the impacts of inflation within your practice, hosted by us, Futrli by Sage. Hopefully everyone's got good visual on my slides, which you should have our holding slide of on the front. So the plan for this afternoon. So you will have seen perhaps that we were meant to have our COO here at Futrli, Helen Cockle, on this webinar, but we have a more than capable replacement in that we've got our colleague DJ Jones, Sage, who's joining us. Just to give a quick intro before I hand over to DJ, my name's Daly and I'm head of advice at Futrli. So I work with our accounting partners in the utilisation of our product as a catalyst for scaling advisory services. And I'll pass you over to DJ for his introduction.
Thank you very much. I was an accountant in practice for 19 years, both ACCA and ICAEW, worked at the Big Four, etc. I founded, grew and sold my own zero goal practice, which focused on digital transformations and app stacking. And I actually ended my practice career as a senior partner at a large regional independent. In 2019, I was headhunted by Iris as head of innovation and worked my way up to global head of productivity, where I helped dream up what you now know as Iris Elements, as well as looking after the likes of Star and Practice Engine. Over the past few years, I've been heavily involved in many of the key acquisitions, including the acquisition of Dext or Receipt Bank into HG, Centre into Iris, plus GoProposal and Futrli into Sage. And here at Sage, I'm the Global Vice President of Product, where I look after every product globally that touches an accountant. Now, that's not just Sage for Accountants, GoProposal and Futrli. It's also the likes of Despachos in Spain and Generation Expert in France. So that's me.
Excellent, thanks, DJ. So, Futrli, just a quick summary of us and who we are before we move on to what is the main subject area of the webinar. So, we are a forecasting solution with five-way forecasting capability across customers, suppliers, profit and loss, balance sheet, and cash flow. We have integration capabilities currently with both Xero and QuickBooks Online, and with accelerated works ongoing for the integration with Sage Cloud Accounting. We have some further detail here, and I'll reference this later on. We'll be sharing the slides post the webinar, so you'll see this detail specific to what we're doing. But to reference one of the key points here, we have the use of algorithms within our solution that allows for automated predictions based upon historical transactional activity, in addition to the ability to create tailored forecast assumptions. So that's who we are. The purpose of the webinar today, or rather, I guess, what has been certainly a large influence or a catalyst for the subject that we're covering, is the current state of the economy. And this isn't something that we want to necessarily dwell on negatively within this webinar, but there's some key points to reference that will flow through and as an undertone throughout the webinar. And specifically what we're talking about here are the rising inflation, currently sitting at I believe 8.6% as per last reading. So increasing levels of inflation obviously leading to increasing costs, and we have, in addition to that, the increasing interest rates. Now, it feels like, certainly from my point of view, that often a lot of the media attention is on the impact to individuals of those economic factors. But these are situations which flow through and impact businesses as well as individuals. And it's the addressing of the approach that businesses and more specifically accounting practices can take in looking to manage or mitigate those situations and those factors as part of their strategic decision making. So they're the areas that we want to cover today, and just give some, I guess, some prompts for some of what is, I guess, would be considered housekeeping exercises, things that can be done for little resource commitment that might put you in better stead for navigating the current state of the economy. So what are the key areas that we're going to cover in today's webinar? So we split it out really into 3 lead sections. And what we felt is that the first 2 of these, being prices and costs, are really the main levers that drive your operations. And so we'll look at those in a bit more detail, what exercises can be carried out within those areas, and then moving on to clarity of real-time data. So that last piece really is a focus on what data is collected, maintained, processed, and then the ability that you have to produce an output of that is going to assist and support you in your strategic decision making. And that is particularly prevalent in times whereby there's lots of challenges that seem to make it much more difficult in running what is a commercially viable operation. So I'll jump into the first one. And it feels like, and I might refer over to DJ here in a second, who will have firsthand experience, but it feels like that we often, as accountants, and perhaps I didn't reference from the off, but I'm an accountant having worked in practice for 16 years. And we have a lot of advice that we pass on to our clients that we perhaps don't always live by ourselves, instead of, in terms of good practice. And one of the things that right now, as a result of these economic factors that I've referenced, is that we are experiencing, both as individuals and as organizations, are experiencing increases in pricing. And therefore, why should that not mean that, even in the situation as a one-off significant economic event, we should not be evaluating our own pricing? And that's something that I would say feels like should be done more regularly, but absolutely in a time like now is something that should be looked at. At the end of the day, we're looking to run a commercially viable operation, and prices need to be aligned with everything that comes with delivering those services that we have on offer. DJ, just to bring you in there, if you don't mind, from your experience and the way that you used to operate, was that something that you visited regularly?
Yeah, it certainly was. I mean, the most important things here are to make sure you have the right service profile, meaning, are you providing the right services to your customers that are going to make you money? Are you providing the right services at the right times of year? So, for example, we all know tax rush is mental. Now, obviously, with ITSA coming in, it will ease slightly, but there's still 6.5 million individuals that will sit outside of ITSA that no doubt a majority will get their tax returns in at the last minute. So we need to be looking at those off periods and what we can do there to bring in revenue. We also need to make sure we charge for everything we do. So, for example, the number of firms I still talk to who go, we'll just do the conversion across to the cloud software, or we'll just do this, or we'll just do that free of charge. And actually, you can make quite a lot of money out of it. My firm was based around digital transformations and app stacking, and that's where the majority of the money came from. So it's just making sure you're charging a sensible fee for what you're actually doing. Now, I'm probably saying things as scary to some people, like app stacking. Well, if you're on this call, you might well be more familiar with it. Some people may not, but you only have to start small, and then you work your way up over a matter of years rather than jumping straight in. Now, obviously here at Sage, it's no surprise that pricing is, near to our hearts. We have the Go Proposal Gloss method that, if you haven't seen it, I suggest you obviously read up on it. That stands for goals, location, obstacles, speed, and services. And we also have our Sage Masterclass, which is free to anyone that's a Sage customer. And there are a number of things on there around pricing, etc. as well. But yes, pricing is by far the most important thing. You can actually drive your revenue up significantly without really doing too much and without winning too many clients.
And I think to add to that from my personal experience, an exercise that I've been involved in a few times, and the honest view on it is that there was a pricing review, and in some instances you might look to raise prices whereby there's relationships that exist that there may not be a huge appetite to continue with, and there would be an expectation that perhaps some of those clients might go as a result. And actually, I think my experience of it is that the appetite or the resistance to price increases is not as great as we might have perceived. DJ, does that translate with you?
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, what you're kind of saying there is every client should be graded, right? You grade them 1, 2, 3, i.e. 1s are the highest payers, 2 medium, 3 lowest, and A, B, C. So A are your best clients, B medium, C are the worst clients. And any 3 Cs you should just be getting rid of because they're taking more time than they're actually saving you. Your 1As are the ones you want to be focusing on, and they are the ones mostly that, provided you can provide value and you can show what that value is going to be, they're happy to pay for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that value piece is a theme, I think, whenever you're talking about pricing. As long as you can promote and highlight the value that you're bringing through your service, then it's mutually beneficial for all parties for pricing to be at a level that suits across the board. Because if it doesn't, as an accountant delivering a service, if you've got any feeling of the pricing not being at a level that suits you, then are you fully committed to it? And equally, for the client on the receiving end, they want to know that they're getting your absolute best. And the way they know that is if everybody is understanding of a fair price being charged.
Yeah, I mean, we saw it quite a lot in practice where you have to give your staff the ability to go out and quote, because that enables them to grow and enables them to work their way up to being partner. But too often they'll come back and go, oh yeah, I want X client and they've brought the price right down. You're like, okay, but you're giving it to them at peanuts and therefore we can't give them the service they're expecting. So you're going to lose that client down the line. So yeah, and just coming back to the economy piece, obviously we are in dire straits at the moment. I think that's fair to say. But as a famous quote from Ayrton Senna says, you cannot overtake 15 cars in sunny weather, but you can when it's raining. So now is the time that actually, if you change a few things in your practice, you can start to really accelerate and really move past your competitors. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's the idea that there's opportunity here as well as challenges. Exactly. Run through. So on that pricing, these are the some of the areas that we've talked about, and just the overall exercise of addressing your pricing. There is some points here that you'll see on the slides around service, product, cost profiles, and where there might be less or increased sensitivity to your pricing, and you'll have an understanding of those based on some of these things on screen, whereby you may have more ability to tweak pricing in certain service areas. Each of these things, an underlying theme here is around the ability to forecast. And if you can supplement your strategic decision making, things like pricing strategy, by the way of producing scenario forecast modeling and seeing what would be the outcome of testing some of these things, then that's really going to enhance your ability to make those decisions from an informed base. Exactly. If you run a forecast that shows you have an off period between certain months, you can align your marketing to that so that you can be doing work in those off months. Yeah, definitely. And I think that's, as we move through these, and I'll move on to our second area. There's going to be a recurring theme around, the value and the enhanced level of information available to you that's going to supplement that decision making. So onto really what is the next area of potential opportunity for optimization, and it's the management and mitigation of costs. And as I'm talking through this, there's a sense that this all sounds fairly basic, and I think a lot of it, is. We're not suggesting that there's anything new here, but perhaps it's that the current economic climate gives rise for an opportunity to reassess some of these things.
And costs is something that is, again, it feels like good practice that costs should be reviewed on a regular basis. We do not want to be harboring any costs that are not essential to us operating in an optimum environment. That almost feels like it's a given. But in addition to that, there are going to be some factors taking play here with the increasing rate of inflation, increasing interest rates. A lot of it will be specific to your practice and the way that you operate. Now, as accountants in practice, our core cost is going to be our people and our people resource. And we need to, or certainly it's going to benefit us as accountants in practice, to have a good gauge on what the impact would be of increasing people costs. There is, as individuals, we're feeling the strain on this. Is that going to pass through into being able to retain staff by having to perhaps increase salaries? What would be the impact of that? And the ability to see what the impact of that would be by way of forecasting is going to help you there. And I think this is certainly another thing that DJ would be good to get your thoughts on. But the recruitment in the space of accountancy at the moment feels like it's challenging, and the value in being able to retain good people is peaked. Is that?
It's certainly what we're seeing. So from talking to many accountancy firms, we're hearing that getting good staff is really, really tough. And when you do get good staff, it's through agencies that know it's tough and are charging higher and higher percentages. So the costs of bringing in new staff is very expensive. However, if you're looking at offshoring or you're looking at outsourcing to other providers, then your bottom point comes into play. You don't want to build up supplier dependency, because if you have all supplier dependency with one provider and something happens or they suddenly go bad, then you're going to be stuck. So you need to be able to spread your eggs across many baskets rather than just one.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that is that ties in quite nicely with a couple of the points that we've got on slide. Around, we've got supplier dependency and communication with key suppliers. So I'll start off on what I feel is again, it's a basic exercise, but one that I don't feel like, I mean, certainly if me as an individual, the communication with the suppliers that I use is probably not as much as it could be, speaking as straightforward as calling Sky to ask whether or not there's a better price that can be had. And ultimately, that conversation is that they want your ongoing custom. And if they want your ongoing custom, there's a price point that will suit both parties. And that is really, that is what I'm trying to communicate, and suggesting that communication with key suppliers as accounting practices, and all of what we're going through here transcends through into the conversations and the advice that you can give to your clients as advisors. And it's got to be that there can never be any harm in having conversations, especially with those key suppliers, so that both parties can benefit from the ongoing relationship that you have in a way that is suitable and commercially viable for both parties.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's a number of costs you're going to have in your practice that you've probably even forgotten about. So you need to go through your trial balance, go through each nominal code, see what you're spending money on. I mean, the main way of thinking behind Sage for Accountants is that we are only billing you for what you actually use, whereas I know other software vendors will sell you a big bundle up front and you carry on paying monthly for that big bundle just to get a different badge. And you can't afford to do that in times like this. It's very much a case of you just pay for what you need.
Yeah, and I think that's that straightforward exercise of just review of trial balance. I would be surprised if the majority of organizations can't find something that is, a redundant cost that can't be dropped. And it might only, it may be a relatively trivial amount, but if that's an ongoing exercise, you're ensuring that you've got streamlined operation, and it's good practice at any time.
Yeah. And the other one is offsetting your costs with incomes. So, for example, you're probably paying rent on your building, unless you're very lucky and own it outright, but you're probably paying rent. But when customers come to you and say, can you be my registered office? Do you charge them for being your registered office? Because you're paying rent on the building. So it's just making sure that actually you're offsetting your costs as much as you can. You're being sensible when you're charging people. You are cutting out all those excessive costs. And as we started off saying in this section, staff is the #1 cost. So make sure you're looking at your utilization and recoverability, and more importantly, your staff skill set. So upskilling them, making sure that they can go out and do app stacks, or making sure that they can give virtual FD services rather than just sitting and churning numbers.
Yeah. And I think that, well, perhaps the last point I wanted to reference on this slide, but one that is certainly of value considering, is the supply dependency piece. And this is something that I'll highlight a bit later on in the webinar in product, but understanding the dependency that you might have on certain suppliers. As accounting practices, perhaps, there's not as much relevance here, but it is worth understanding where you might have that dependency. This also correlates, with our revenue and our income. Do we have a high degree of dependency on a certain either service level in terms of dependency or specific clients in terms of dependency? It's something that should, at least, you should have awareness of. And it feels like a what if scenario of losing a particular area of revenue, particular client for their revenue, or losing the ability to lean on a supplier for whom you've got a lot of dependency on. What impact would that have on your operation? And so I think when I come into, and I'll highlight this in product when we move into a bit of product later on, highlight how you can both assess that dependency and have a visual of the impact that might have on your forecast.
It's not just the impact on your forecast either, it's the impact on your reputation. So if a key supplier goes wrong, then reputationally that could actually ruin you. And that's far worse than an operational bubble, because operational bubbles you can get past easier. Yeah,
agreed, absolutely. Okay, so, and I'll just worth mentioning, we're going to open out a bit of a Q&A after the end of our slides. So do feel free to store up any questions, drop them in the chat if they're sort of coming to you now, and we'll look to address as many as we can off the back of the webinar. So the last section, I guess, that we wanted to cover and just have some discussion on is around, as you can see on screen, accounting, reporting, forecasting, and scenario modeling. So we've referenced a few times the value in being able to model various scenarios and flex those. What ifs? What if we go down this route, take this option? What would be the impact of doing X, Y, Z, and the value in that? I think what I wanted to just cover was almost just stepping back from that and considering the quality and timeliness of data that's available to us as accounting practices. There's a lot of work, and a lot of work driven by MTD in migration to the cloud that is in the space of having a goal of achieving real-time information and the value that comes off the back of that. As accounting practices, how closely we align ourselves with the effective collection, processing, and output of data that we might communicate and advise to our clients, I'm not sure. Certainly it feels like as accounting practices, especially ones that have been around for a while, there's a legacy of software ecosystem that might not lend itself necessarily to being able to easily optimize. But the value that can come out of you being able to access reliable, timely data, across the board for your clients in terms of CRM aspects, but for your practice in terms of its financials and your ability then to forecast and model, feels like it's exponential in its value. DJ, thoughts on the data piece?
Yeah, no, I mean, I completely agree. This is not just about taking averages over the past 3 years and spitting them out into the future. This is about taking into account seasonality, what if scenarios. If staff costs go up 5%, what does that do to our impact? So modeling is critical at the moment, whether you're an accountancy firm or whether you're providing it to your clients. During the last recession, everyone was saying cash is king, and that's going to be no different this time around as well. So if you can build your cash balances up, and model it so they're constantly building, then that's the best way to go.
Excellent, thanks, DJ. Just checking our chat box. Doesn't look like we've got any in there at the moment. So what I'll do is I'm just going to drop into product just to highlight some of the ways in which we might be able to carry out the exercises that we've referenced through the webinar. So bear with me.
Dan, just very quickly, apparently Q&A has been disabled. So if you have any questions, stick them in the chat rather than Q&A, and we'll try and pick them up from there.
Right, thank you. I can now see, as you reference that, yeah, that is where that's coming through. Okay, so chat box for any questions, and we'll look to address them post having a little look in product. So just pause my screen share 1 second whilst I pull product up. Okay, DJ, can you see my screen okay?
I can see your PowerPoint at the moment.
Right, okay. Stand by 1 second. Just going to reshare my screen to ensure that we get bear with me 2 moments. Okay, so we should now be in product. DJ, you can see?
We can indeed.
Okay, so we're just in now our Futrli platform, just with some demo data to highlight some of the areas in which we've referenced through the webinar. And what we'll do is, so it also worth us referencing, there's a lot of development that is going on within product. And so there'll be enhanced functionality coming through into product that you'll see now over the coming weeks. One of the first things I wanted to reference, and here we are sitting in our prediction engine. So this is whereby there has been an assessment of historical actual transactional data, and the algorithm that underlies our platform is pushing out some predicted values based on assessment of those historicals. Now, within platform, you have here the ability to toggle on or off both any predicted forecasts based upon that algorithm or any additional forecast assumptions that have been built in. So this is where you can start to get a really quick feel for the impact of certain decision making. So this might be an example of, so if we just switch these back on and we had our inflationary price increase on our sales applied, we can see a snapshot up here of the cash position and how that's impacted. And in addition to that, we can see on the fly, having made that assumption forecast, the impact that would then have on our profit and loss. And again, you can see the detail here as to how that's flowing through. And equally, you can see what that does across balance sheet and then cash flow. So having the ability to quickly toggle on or off these assumptions that we build into platform is going to allow for an easy way of assessing the impact of these strategic decisions. And that can be built in across all of our different sections here. So the other thing that's worth referencing here is that we're a 5-way forecasting platform. So we can forecast based upon the ledgers. So you've synchronized your source data through to platform. You then have a list of all items that sit within both of your ledgers. And if there are delays or revised due dates or expected receipt dates for any of these items, then you can build those in here. So you can set a new due date, which then flows the expected cash flow accordingly. You can then see what the impact of that is in here. We also have the same ability to see the impact of applying assumptions to certain areas of expenses. So for example, we've got our salaries in here, and if we increased an inflationary salary increase here of 500, and we can again toggle that on or off, which then updates automatically, and you can see the impact of that should that be a scenario that's followed. The last bit that I just wanted to touch on in here is the cash flow statement. So this is what's flowing out the back of the forecasts that have been built. And in here on the view forecasts, you have a list of all of the forecast scenarios that have been built out, and the ability then off the back of that to report upon the difference or comparison between those forecasts that have been saved. Okay, so that is platform and some of the areas whereby you can quickly have valuable supplementary information, detail on forecasts based on these assumptions and different pricing strategies or potential scenarios that might play out, and how they then may impact your cash flow, your operational performance, etc. So I'll just drop back into the main webinar. Presumably we can now just see each other, or at least myself and DJ, I hope is enough. And as I mentioned earlier, we'll be sharing the slides with everybody post this session. If there are any questions, or if anyone would like to raise any points, then the Q&A is available. We'll hold on for a few moments just to see if anything flows through. DJ, any thoughts, closing statements?
Yeah, so as you know yourself, we have some significant enhancements come into Futrli over the coming months, and they will not only bring it in line with feature parity plus with Advisor, but also new features that you've never seen before. So obviously keep your eyes open for that. And for those of you that remember the Win Forecast days, we also have a feature within Futrli that not many people know about, which is the Google Sheets. And within Google Sheets, there is a capability of just putting your salaries in. So if you've got a new staff member, you can just use the Google Sheets to do it, and it will calculate all of your taxes and the like, and you can push that into product as well. So for those of you that loved Win Forecast and are looking for a replacement after all these years, then this is certainly one to consider. We have got some questions now starting to come in, which is very good.
Fantastic, and thank you for referencing the salaries Google Sheets with the hot links, because that is something that I hadn't referenced and is particularly valuable, especially being accounting practice core cost. We've referenced that point, so that is a key feature. And also,
it's also amortization of loans and bits and pieces as well. So the system will do all of that for you and then push it directly into your forecast. So you're not having to sit there and go through month by month, putting in your individual figures. You just use Google Hot Sheets to do that.
So a couple of questions coming through. First one is whether or not this is CPD verifiable. And if so, how do we get certificated? Now, I don't know the answer to that, but I can find out. Unless DJ, you're in possession of a.
No, we need to know from XU Magazine, because it'll be them that control the CPD side of things for this.
Okay, so we will find out, and we will let all attendees know whether or not and what process might need to be followed. So then another question we've got is a time frame on integrating the product with Sage Business Cloud.
Yes, so very soon is what I can say on that one. So it's in final testing. So it's not like we haven't started it yet. It's actually been developed. It's in final testing. We're just going through the final hurdles now. So you'll be getting the integration with SBCA very soon.
Fantastic. So, and that is the extent of our questions currently that have been raised. As I mentioned, we'll be circulating slides afterwards. I think we'll hold on a little longer, just see if anything more flows through.
We've obviously done a fantastic job, Dan. That's the thing.
I think
no one has any questions.
Yeah, we've covered all potential questions that might have been raised.
And we've only lost 3 people throughout the whole webinar, so that's fantastic.
Is that right? That's pretty good. Low churn.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think on that note, we'll bid you farewell. Thank you very much for attending, and hope to see you on some future webinars down the line.
Thank you very much.
DJ.
Thank you. Bye-bye.